From Black Friday through to Cyber Monday, you can sign up to The Athletic for £1 per month for 12 months. See the link in the description to sign up now.
Last season, expectations for Sheffield United were pretty low. Chris Wilder's team were expected to be the side that was least equipped to stay in the Premier League. Of course, they ended up finishing 9th and actually challenged for European football quite consistently throughout that season. This season, with 9 games played, Sheffield United are yet to win at all and are rooted to the foot of the table. So what's gone wrong? Last season, when Sheffield United were promoted, the buzz term around them was overlapping centre-backs. Now, this was something that Chris Wilder and his assistant Alan Knill had actually been working on since their League One days. And it was a way that Sheffield United developed to break down teams that sat back and tried to give Sheffield United lots of possession, but keep a low block and make themselves hard to break down. So Wilder and Knill lined Sheffield United up in a kind of 3-5-2. We can see here the centre-backs in the wide positions, O'Connell and Basham. They're the first choice, although O'Connell's been injured quite a lot, and we'll come to talk about that later. These players would push forwards into the wide areas, and the wing-backs here, Stevens and Baldock, would kind of come inside. One of the reasons this worked was that Sheffield United were able not just to generate numerical overloads in the wide areas, but they're able to do so by having players making runs from positions where they're not expected to make runs from. Nobody thinks that a centre-back is going to be the player that's tearing down the outside and trying to get a cross in. So if the marking players are this 7 here, for example, for O'Connell, and number 11 here for Basham, as they push forwards, either these players have got to track them all the way back, which makes the team basically have nobody in the attacking third to counter-attack, or they have to leave them, in which case Sheffield United straight away have a numerical superiority in their attacking third of the pitch. Further to this, with the wing-backs cutting inside, if we push these strikers up here, you then have players that are in and around the edge of the box. They're there for pullbacks. If the ball breaks, they can then drive forwards. And we'd see Sheffield United scoring quite a lot of goals through these players. So while that attacking system certainly caught Premier League managers on the hop and they struggled to adapt to it, it's also worth pointing out that Sheffield United defended really intelligently last season, and in Dean Henderson had an exceptional goalkeeper. If you look at expected goals against, which is the probability that a shot becomes a goal based on a kind of historic assessment of the quality of that shot and its location and so on, Henderson prevented somewhere between 9 and 7 expected goals. Now that's a massive advantage that Sheffield United had. And while Aaron Ramsdale has come in and performed pretty much to expectations, he's about average for expected goals against at the moment. It's a big difference when you have a goalkeeper who can save that many goals across the course of the season, particularly when Sheffield United weren't scoring large numbers. That's something that we'll come to in a bit. Now, in terms of how they defended, if we can see the ball here on this side of the pitch, let's give it to a player. What United would do is they'd fall back into a sort of 5 shape, but then the midfielders would flex across and they would be looking to cut off passing angles and try and isolate that player. What they weren't doing was pressing really aggressively or challenging with intensity. What's quite interesting is that if you look at this season and last season, in terms of relative to other teams in the Premier League, Sheffield United are in the bottom 2 for what we call passes per defensive action, which is basically a measure of pressing intensity. The lower the number, the higher the press. And they're also in the bottom 2 for challenge intensity. And challenge intensity is how many blocks, tackles, interceptions, and so on you make for every minute that your opponent's in possession. They were in the bottom 2 for that last season as well. So relative to the rest of the Premier League, they haven't changed. But they are pressing with less intensity and they are making fewer challenges. So relative to themselves, they've kind of fallen off a little bit. And they aren't defending space quite so well. So we could, for example, contrast that with a team like West Ham, who also don't press a massive amount and challenge with massive intensity, but are much, much better at controlling the space. Now, one of the reasons for this change in the ability to defend rather than perhaps the manner of defending is the injury to Jack O'Connell here. Now, O'Connell's very, very good in the air. He's very dominant in set pieces and defending those, and that's been an area of weakness for Sheffield United this season. But what it also means is that Enda Stevens, the left wing back, has had to fill in sometimes on that left-hand side. Ethan Ampadu has played there as well, but it's not necessarily been successful. And this is one of the issues with a team like Sheffield United. United's ability to sort of move across the pitch here and block off these passes and everything, that's based in an understanding of how the team plays. And obviously, when you lose a couple of crucial players, whether it's Fleck in midfield or O'Connell in defence, it makes it much, much harder to be able to work those patterns with the same degree of intensity and understanding. And without this same degree of understanding, Sheffield United's opponents are now finding it easier to progress the ball into dangerous areas. If, for example, we look at passes into the final third and passes into the penalty area last season compared with this season, Sheffield United are giving up, on average, 2 or 3 passes a game more into the penalty area or the final third than they were last season. Now, that's a pretty significant difference because it means that teams are not only able to get the ball into more dangerous areas, and with Aaron Ramsdale there in goal instead of Dean Henderson, you don't have a last line of defence that's preventing 7 to 9 goals a season. So we can see that these injuries and replacements have been a really, really significant problem for Sheffield United. But it's not just in defence where things are going wrong. So we've looked a little bit at how Sheffield United attacked last season, and they're not doing it as well this season. Now, there's a big problem here because Sheffield United strikers, and we've got McGoldrick and McBurney here on our lineup, and they also use Oliver Burke and Lys Mousset, are not exactly reliable as far as goals are concerned. So McBurney and Mousset last season were the top scorers. They both got 6 goals each. In terms of a goals per 90, Mousset was getting about 0.44, which is actually pretty reasonable, but he didn't play many games. He has issues with fitness. He doesn't really see games out. McBurney was languishing down in about the 70th or 80th spot of players who'd actually scored in the Premier League. So in terms of being a reliable go-to source of goals, Sheffield United don't really have that. One of the ways they countered that was through the dynamism of their movements. So, for example, John Lundstrom here would be getting forward into the box, particularly towards the back post if attacks were developing on the left-hand side. You'd also have Norwood pushing up, particularly into this kind of right half space to try and thread passes through into the middle, and Fleck similarly would be getting forwards. And we've already looked at how the wing-backs would get forwards as well. So Sheffield United could get quite a large number of men in the box last season. Unfortunately, this season, that is happening considerably less. Again, one of the reasons for that is the absence of O'Connell. So whereas before O'Connell would be adding drive and dynamism coming up this side and Stevens would come in field and that would allow Fleck to push up, there was this kind of whole chain reaction of as players moved forwards and made runs that would drag other players away, there was space opened up. O'Connell's not been able to do that because he's been injured, and that means that there's less drive and dynamism on the left-hand side. Now, last season, Sheffield United attacked fairly evenly through both of their flanks. About 40% of their attacks came on either flank, and the remainder was through the middle. This season, it's much, much more skewed towards the right-hand side, so there's a lot more of an emphasis on what Basham can do getting forwards here, what Baldock can do going forwards there. Also, a lot more of the ball is going through Norwood in the middle. If you look at how Sheffield United passed last season compared to this season, you'd see a much greater concentration between, say, for example, the outside centre-backs, the wing-backs and the outside midfielders on either flank, whereas now Norwood is really the kind of passing hub of the team. What that means is that if the opposition are able to get in on Norwood and prevent him from seeing much of the ball, and can also get, into marking positions on Basham and Baldock, it's a lot easier to stop Sheffield United. As we said right at the beginning, part of the reason that Chris Wilder developed this system was to have players making unexpected runs from positions where you wouldn't normally think that they would. And obviously, the fewer of those players that are able to do that, the easier it is for the opposition to just say, well, if we mark Basham and we mark Baldock and we mark Norwood, then we can shut down how Sheffield United play. That's effectively what's been happening. When you add into that the fact that, say, McGoldrick and McBurney aren't, I don't want to say they're not natural goal scorers, but they're not going to get you lots and lots of goals, all of a sudden Sheffield United become a lot more toothless in attack. Last season, they only scored 39 goals anyway. It was very, very much their defensive performance that propelled them up the table and caused them to do as well as they did. And this is really the problem with Sheffield United, where the absence of a player like O'Connell affects both the defensive pattern and the attacking one. It means that Sheffield United concede more goals, it's easier to pass through them, but also it robs them of that creativity, that unexpected approach that made them so dangerous. So that's pretty much what's gone wrong with Sheffield United. It's nothing massive, it's nothing hugely significant beyond injuries to key players. And when you're a team like Sheffield United that's so reliant on a system to baffle opponents and to create, then you're going to have major problems when parts of that system break down. Add to that the absence of Dean Henderson and a striker who's going to get you 15 or 20 goals a season, and suddenly you can see why newly promoted teams are often expected to struggle. If you don't have the finances and the resources to get real squad depth, then injuries will be a disproportionate issue for you. And really the margins are that fine. Sheffield United, a top 10 team last season, rooted to the foot of the table this season, and it's one or two injuries that have caused that.
From Black Friday through to Cyber Monday, you can get The Athletic for just £1 per month for 12 months. Yes, that's right, £1 per month for 12 months. Exclusive access to dedicated Premier League team journalists, plus all of your favourites, including David Ornstein, Ollie Kay, Daniel Taylor and Amy Lawrence, not to mention 10 other sports, a host of podcasts and some of the world's best sports journalists. The Athletic is truly the place to be, and you can now join with definitely the best deal of the year. £1 per month for 12 months. Visit the link in the description to join up now, just with the best deal of the year. Theathletic.com/Tifo Football.